There was a comedy drama romance movie called Irreconcilable Differences in 1984 that starred Ryan O'Neal and Shelley Long and a very young Drew Barrymore. It was nominated for 2 Golden Globe Awards. But believe me, if we have unreconciled bank accounts, no one will find it romantic or funny, and our business certainly will not be nominated for any awards. To reconcile an account means to compare it to the financial institution's records, usually via a statement, and be sure that everything that the bank has for transactions, debits, credits, and fees is also entered into QuickBooks. It should be done consistently and in a timely manner. Timeliness is important since on occasion, even banks make mistakes, and it's easier to address them sooner rather than later. So we usually reconcile once a month when the statement becomes available. In QuickBooks, we can reconcile accounts in several different ways. Move to the bottom right corner under the Banking section and click or tap the Reconcile icon. This, of course, brings up all of our accounts, and we need to designate which account we want to reconcile. We're going to work with our Equipment ABC bank account, which is very simple, has not had a lot of transactions, but will show the process of working through a reconciliation. The information that is shown here is based on when the account was set up. Assuming that's correct, we should be able to work without having to do anything about the statement date. It should automatically increment to the next month after each reconciliation. It also tells us that our beginning balance is whatever our ending balance was the last time we reconciled. What we need to do is enter our new ending balance, and that should be the amount that's shown on the statement. Our statement shows $1,491.50. Now, there are 2 different ways to handle any service charges and any interest that may appear on the account. One is to enter it right here in the reconciliation window. So if our bank account has been charged $10 in service fees, but also earned $1.50 in interest, we can enter those right here. If, on the other hand, we want to enter them as part of the register, then we would not enter them here and simply count them as transactions like anything else on the account. One of the reasons we need to do that is if we're using electronic banking, because any payments for fees and any interest would have already come through as a standard transaction. QuickBooks assumes that these fees occurred on the same date as the closing date of the statement, which is usually pretty accurate, but we need to make sure that we correctly attribute these fees and interest to the right types of accounts. For our service charges, we already have an account called Bank Service Charges, which would be very appropriate. The same is true for our interest. This is simple bank interest, so we'll call it interest income. Once we have these ready to go, we simply click or tap Continue. This actually opens the reconciliation window. If this account had a lot of transactions and we had done a lot of things with the account since the last statement, there's a checkbox on the top right that simplifies our view by hiding transactions that are after the statement date. This account does not have a lot of transactions, so we won't worry about that. QuickBooks separates our checks and payments and places them on the left side of the screen from our deposits and other credits and places those on the right side of the screen. We have the option to mark all or unmark all, which can be very fast if we're pretty sure that everything cleared and we don't feel like clicking down, making a whole lot of check marks. On the right-hand side, we can see the math that is being done to complete our reconciliation. We've entered a $10 service charge, as well as $1.50 interest, and an ending balance of $1,491.50. Our cleared balance is $491.50, and the difference right now is $1,000. That actually makes our reconciliation very simple. But let's pretend for just a moment that it's not. How do we work through a reconciliation? Well, now comes the time we simply have to start comparing transactions in this window to the ones that are on our statement. I always like to start with deposits. By simply comparing the statement to the window, we can place a check mark next to everything that appears on the statement. We would do this one at a time as we went through the statement. If something's not on the statement, we do not check it. All of the deposits should be on the statement unless there was one made just before the statement closing date. If older deposits aren't on the statement and haven't cleared yet, then we need to explore why. Withdrawals, on the other hand, are not necessarily cashed immediately. It may take a little more to decide what looks right or what needs to be further investigated as far as checks go. Either way, the reconciliation is simply a matter of going through deposits and going through any expenses that there are, making sure that everything is selected, and then coming back to the lower right corner and making sure that our difference is zero. If the difference is anything but zero, we need to identify why. We need to compare the statement to the entries to make sure that we haven't accidentally checked or unchecked something. It could also be that we entered the ending balance or the service charges or the interest incorrectly. Those typos that happen on occasion. If we think we have transactions that are incorrect, we can double click and it will actually open the transaction in the appropriate register or window so that we can take a look and possibly modify it. If transactions are simply missing, then we need to add them in the appropriate windows before we continue with the reconciliation. If we think that we accidentally entered something incorrectly, for example, maybe we entered $15 in interest earned instead of $1.50, then we can click or tap the Modify button that's kind of in the middle between the beginning balance information and our calculations on the right. This simply reopens the same window that we started with, allows us to make modifications, and then we can continue in the same window. Now, I know that often I sit down and do a reconciliation and I do not have time to finish it. And if that's true, then we can use the Leave option in the very far bottom right corner of this window. When we leave it, QuickBooks saves our work so that we don't have to start all over with the reconciliation process again. The next time that we open up, it'll open back up with everything saved the way that we left it. If we do leave without finishing a reconciliation, any items that we had marked as cleared but had not finished reconciling will show an asterisk in the register's cleared column. Fortunately, this reconciliation is fairly simple, so we're almost done. Whether our difference is zero, which is the best outcome, or if we can't find the discrepancy and have determined that the difference is an acceptable amount, when we're finished, we click Reconcile Now. If the difference is anything other than zero, QuickBooks will make an adjustment entry in the account. This is actually done as a journal entry, which is the formal and correct way to make an adjustment to a balance without having to show any type of specific activity. In a perfect world, we'd never have to do this. Occasionally, in the real world, we do. On a more positive note, when our difference is zero, which is what it should be more often than not, we are good to go. Whether it required an adjustment or not, at this point, our account is balanced and reconciled, and we see that we're given an opportunity to see a report. We can take a look at this report now, showing either a summary or details or both. But notice it also tells us that we don't have to look at it now. This report will be available from the Reports menu in the future. So we'll go ahead and simply close the window instead of displaying or printing that report. It's important to remember that reconciling is the only way to ensure that our records match the financial institution's records. It is the correct and responsible way to manage bank accounts, no matter what system you choose to use. QuickBooks, fortunately, makes the process easier and faster so that reconciliation does not become a cumbersome task, but instead just one of the routine tasks that we need to do to keep our business on track.